did you manage to effect change or bring about the discussions that you actually hoped for?
If I'm expecting things to happen immediately, then I'm just being gullible.
You were CEO at 26.
My collapse was at 38. I laid there 4 hours by the window of my 18th floor flat that day when
Oh shit.
I was caught weird.
By fellow MPs?
Yeah, I mean, I won't say who came to hang out with us.
But you tell us later.
What happens in the tea room stays in the tea room.
Oh. Ladies and gentlemen, we have had the privilege of having on as guests MPs from the ruling party, MPs from the opposition parties, candidates who tried to be MPs but didn't. Today, we have with us someone who made it into parliament without even running for elections. Her list of titles over the years includes the likes of change maker, social entrepreneur, impact investor, mental health advocate, author, board chair, CEO, leadership speaker, and of course, former nominated member of parliament. Please welcome Anthea Ong!
Welcome back to the company.
Wow.
We just realized that she was on MOSG, which is like when we first started a couple of years ago. Thank you
when
for
I was
supporting
actually
our small
in
brand.
parliament then.
Absolutely. No, exactly. So you've recently been involved in recent debates and conversations around the relevance of the NMP scheme.
Yeah.
We really want to dive into that, but I should also mention that John has flirted with the idea of hoping to be an NMP, and we wanted to like
open
to the idea.
Please.
Open to the idea.
Good.
Publicly yearning.
Recently or like long time ago and then buried down.
Flirted a couple of weeks ago.
Well done. Please do.
So we wanted to hear a little bit more about like how did you become an NMP? How were you approached?
So I was in fact approached in 2011.
Oh,
And then I turned it down, thinking, nah, politics not for me. Once I finished my corporate career, I was just gonna be on the ground, do the social entrepreneurship thing. But then 7 years later, in 2018, I was approached again. And this time by the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Centre, NVPC.
Yeah. So just for a quick refresher for everyone, NCMPs are those who actually ran for elections, but unfortunately didn't win and are of the closest margin. So there's
The best losers.
The best of the losers. There are about up to 12 of them. And then NMPs are non-partisan. So there's up to 9.
Yes.
And like you mentioned, they come from various sectors, whether it's from the arts, business.
What do they stand for then?
Nominated
member of parliament, and NCMP is non-constituent.
Non-constituency members of parliament.
One for election, one
so the
didn't.
nominated member of parliament scheme, they have to ultimately be appointed by the president.
Yeah.
The elected presidency is non-partisan. And so the appointment is actually done by the elected president. And so I did. I remember that was 26 September 2018. Yeah. So I went through the functional group route, right? Which is the people and civic sector. The sector would nominate you, and then there's a sector coordinator.
Okay.
And then it would go to all the MPs, right? But then the final round would be the special select committee. If I remember correctly, there were 48 applications.
For how many seats?
9. So there
So
are
there are up to 9 seats.
up to 9.
20%.
The applications are not restricted or limited only to those who came through the functional sector coordinator.
Right.
So if you like, you can go, in other words, the open category.
Okay.
So nominate yourself.
Yeah.
You are nominated by your friends.
How qualified must my friend be to nominate me?
Or how qualified must you be for your friend to
No,
go?
I'm
both
definitely.
sides,
If there's a bar there, I accept.
Sure.
But for the nominator,
Okay.
Yeah, no. So the...
No.
anybody.
No, meaning, no. I mean, of course, if you want to be more strategic, then you of course want to bring some like heavyweights
Right.
to endorse you. So that's more a strategy thing. We call that a Santos, which is also the same thing for those who are actually going for nominations
Right.
for election, right? So for me, my personal experience was, I thought, okay, you want to put me up? Okay, I'm up for the challenge. And I said yes in 2018 because I'm like, 7 years, I realized that no matter how much you try on the ground, and look, it's important to still do the work on the ground, right? But there will come a time where you hit the wall, where systemic changes need to happen.
Okay.
To enable some of these things to happen. And most of the things that I was doing was mental health.
Yeah.
And if policies don't change, then you can sort of talk about mental health a lot, but you still, have all the stigma. You still have, schools not actually teaching our children about mental health. No matter how much we do on the ground, it's not going to change. So I felt it was really important to say, okay, I'm going to take this on, try to change the policies to enable some of this work on the ground. So a bit strange to get a call. Then I'm like, I was in KL, I have to come back. And this is the strangest thing. I actually fast on Monday. I fast both food fast as well as digital fast.
Oh, wow.
Every Monday, right? And I've been doing this now for over a decade. And so apparently Parliament was trying to get me
On Monday.
to tell me that actually you got selected as a nominated member of Parliament. But I wasn't looking at my phone. Half a day lah. The digital fast is half a day. Food fast is full day. Okay. By the time I came on, which is usually after 12, when I come on greet, I saw the and then I talked to them. They're like, oh, yeah, we're going to put out the press release in 2 hours' time. I'm like, what?
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And then, the news will come. The media will have inquiries and all that.
Yeah.
So what is it like once you've become an MP? Like, did you manage to effect change or bring about the discussions that you actually hoped for? Were you disappointed at first?
I was a little, but then I think very soon enough, I realized that if I'm expecting things to happen immediately, then I'm just being gullible. Especially once you know how policies change and the way the system works. The system meaning civil service, the whole sort of the ministries, going through what they need to go through, the evidence-based aspects of it that they need to be writing on. So once I get that, I realized, yes, the evidence base is important. But actually, when I sit up to speak in Parliament, I'm really not necessarily speaking to the policymakers or the front benches. I'm actually speaking to the media, but actually directly to the people.
Right.
What did you want? What do you want to see?
I want systemic change from making mental health education compulsory in schools. So we go all the way upstream. Up until then, our mental health strategy was very medicalized and very clinical.
Sure.
In other words, make sure we support those already in crisis.
Yep.
I think it was Desmond Tutu who came up with this parable, right? Very often we end up just scooping the babies out of the river without actually stopping and said, hey, how come the babies are in the river in the first place?
Yeah.
And so we allocate so much resources to downstream work and effort without actually thinking about upstream. So upstream is, let's make sure mental health literacy is as important as literacy and numeracy. Right? When kids have a toothache, they know what to do. When kids today feel really, really down and depressed, do they know what to do?
Right.
I
The
don't
adults
think
don't
we
know
do.
what to do also.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, the adults will be working workplaces. So also push for, my maiden speech was actually on the Employment Amendment Bill.
Yep.
So it gave me the opportunity to then speak about workplace mental health. And I push for us to, really just remove this archaic practice of saying, do you have a mental health history?
Right.
At the job application stage, right? Like, come on, right? Like, how's that actually gonna do anything for the stigma?
Do you need to say something every time Parliament comes together?
You don't have to, but I would say, why not? Because especially, I saw that as a deep, deep privilege and an honor to serve my country this way, right? In the highest hall of the land. And if you have an opportunity to be able to speak up, then I think you should. And the same way as you should be asking questions.
Yeah.
Of course, don't do it for the sake of doing it.
Were your fellow NMPs as active as you in Parliament?
Walter Tessera was, for sure.
Being an NMP, there's no party to guide you, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And so the scheme is also, you also don't have a huge pool of alumni that is also free to groom the next batch. I don't think so. Maybe until you came along.
Okay.
Okay. So then, was there someone that prepped you for your maiden speech? Was there someone that taught you the decorum of Parliament? Or they gave you a PDF on like, don't swear?
So there was an orientation and onboarding, right? In fact, the speaker usually would do that. The Parliament office, the clerk and the deputy clerk would give us an onboarding, tell us what standing orders are all about. Standing orders means essentially the code of conduct, what's expected of you, how do you file questions.
But here's the thing, right? But when John mentioned that there's no party to guide you, but there's also no party to set an agenda, and then there's no expectation.
Yalla.
But the organization that nominated you, perhaps, would they have some expectation of you that they're like, oh,
I mean, not
like
really,
lobby
which
our
is
cause,
why,
please. Yeah.
which is why the latest survey, I mean, it's restarting a conversation.
Yeah.
We need to relook at these functional groups. So there isn't really a review or performance
They chose you
evaluation
already,
system.
Then now they trust you lah.
Then whenever you step up, right, did the other MPs go like, oh, here we go, she's going to talk about mental health again?
Yes, I did. So I had
Do
that.
you feel that?
I did. And some people actually, but I'm not shy lah, because I mean, it's come from a lived experience, right? Almost 20 years ago, I had my own personal brush with depression, and that was at the height. I was a CEO. I had such a very fortunately a very sort of illustrious professional career. To go to such a deep, dark place and then coming out of it, really, I personally feel it's because I have a very strong support system. Because otherwise, I can imagine it'll be really hard, right? And having gone to that deep, dark place, I just feel like if we don't actually, change some of these structural factors, those who don't have the support system I have. Now, everybody deserves that support system, but not everyone has that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And therefore, I think when I'm speaking on mental health, I'm not doing it because, it is a, flavor of the month or people ask me to do it. It's also very personal, right? And it's not just my own lived experience, my nephew, my cousin, my friends. So no, but I was quite weird. Because
By fellow MPs?
yeah, I mean, of course, in jest and fondly, right? Then
Wait, what does that mean? Like you walk into parliament and they're like, hey, today how many times you talk about mental health? Hey, today we talk about mental health, right?
No. And this is from my fellow NMP. He shared with me with the most sort of respect and admiration. He said, Anthea, I'm just so amazed that every time you speak up, you will always be able to find a way to
an angle.
What kind of backhanded shit is that?
No, but I really do want to touch upon this though, because I think in background research, obviously, I was very, very like amazed and impressed at this, because like you said, you were CEO at 26 at international companies, and then you had this perfect storm. I think you wrote you had like a shattered marriage of your bringing it up, broken business, and
thank you for saying that. But
account. And I thought what's very interesting was that the online accounts, even either by you or by other writers, always seem to quickly move from rock bottom to all the successes that you had after. What was the in between like? What was that journey of rediscovering yourself?
Yeah, initially it was very, very difficult. I'm a visual person. So I remember one time I just felt like I was this paper mache, that has been, up to that point, I think my collapse was at 38. But actually it was when I realized, wow, all this amazing stuff, it's quite hollow inside. Meaning that maybe up to that point I was defining myself and my sense of identity just based on all of this
job titles, material success.
How much money in my bank account. And the time when I went to a very deep, dark place was that day when I saw my bank account having only $16.
Oh shit.
So I could not withdraw money out, right? So that day was like the lowest of the lowest. But the interesting thing is that, I mean, deep, dark place it means I went to an unsafe place.
Yeah.
Right. And then interestingly, it was because my mind is like, I've lost this. I'm no longer a CEO. I'm no longer a wife. I don't even have money. I'm gonna starve, right? What? And of course, there's so much shame.
Yeah.
So much shame. The ego was just so bruised. That's why I felt like a paper mache just being crushed.
Yeah.
But then thankfully after 4 hours, really I just like
4 hours.
4 hours?
Yeah, I laid there 4 hours by the window of my 18th floor flat. And that's where the not so safe thought was lah.
Yeah.
Right. Thankfully, the mind shifted from like, oh, what have I lost? Thankfully, seriously, to what do I still have? And that helped me come back to obviously family, friends, and all that. But it doesn't mean that I was okay immediately overnight. And I think the brokenness, the sense of displacement, don't know what to do now. What do I do? The business was also a massive collateral damage. But what then came to me was, and I had to also swallow my pride and ask for help financially.
Right.
Who are you gonna ask?
Friends, of course, family. Straight away, just come forward.
Yeah.
Right. But even with friends, right, you ask, and that's truly a humbling experience.
Yeah.
That is super humbling. Like you really shed every inch of ego.
Yeah.
Right. Looking back, I know this as cliche as it sounds, right? That got me very close to confronting me. And
that was the start of
what I would call it healing. I would call it kind of really doing a lot of inner work, understanding who I am. So now I'm just like always reminding myself, think less about yourself without thinking of yourself less.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Right? So that was how I started. I definitely wanted to support, the lower income communities, especially single mothers, migrant workers. So when the call came, it was quite easy to just say, okay, I'm going to stand for migrant workers and mental health.
Yeah.
And I call it the 3M. So
You don't treat it already, as I.
As a
Okay,
CEO.
no, wait, the 3M migrant workers.
No. So actually mental health for sure, right? That's like the forefront. Marginalized communities that just include, also of course include migrant workers.
Okay. And then
The 3M, the third M, Mother Earth.
Oh,
there we go.
Very fast track. Because I really was championing my club change.
me or what, then we're okay with it. As much as we've had NMPs for as long as I've been alive, it's just,
literally.
which I just learned, right? I can only name maybe 4 NMPs in Singapore, including you already.
Oh, thank you. But that's also a bit sad.
It's true though.
How many do you all know more?
Tomiko.
Yeah, then that's her.
No,
then that's
Tomiko was
Kelvin.
not.
Oh, he was one.
Then I thought it was Tomiko.
I thought he was an
No.
NMP.
He was
No.
ambassador at large.
Ambassador at large.
And then there's the Monsieur.
Eunice Olsen.
Oh,
Yes.
there's
Yes.
that also.
Yes, the youngest NMP.
Yeah. To wear a devil's advocate hat.
Please.
If, like you mentioned, these are things that voters don't really care about, is Parliament really then the forum for these issues to be brought up, as important as they are?
Well, then shouldn't Parliament in a democracy reflect exactly everybody that forms the society?
Well, technically,
Technically,
the majority
and that's
of voices,
why I
guess.
think there is the need to think about, we came up with the NMP scheme. What is to say that we need to always stick to either you are completely first past the post or you go into proportional representation. Maybe there's something that we need to think about. Now, I don't have the answers, but I think we need to ask questions because there's enough of what's going on around the world for us to not sit back and say, let's just continue chugging along with what we have, because things will move very fast. And the kind of polarization and division that we see, we don't want that to happen here. I don't think minority groups should feel like, okay, it's not in our place. Unless of course it's not a democracy, but we are. Then everybody should feel like they are represented.
Do you think there's
at
a
some
way
level
for there to be important issues that are being raised up, but for the electorate to care enough for? Because that's the thing that I'm trying to struggle with. It's a democracy, but it's issues that are being raised by someone who wasn't elected. So then, is it actually democratically representative of what the people feel?
Yeah.
It does feel like the extreme left that are not in parliament, right?
Right.
It feels like Caucasians trying to feel offended for minorities. It feels like people saying cultural appropriation for cultures that appreciate sharing of culture. I think that's the point I'm trying to make. And I do see the merit in that. And so therein lies my question, which is, you are a champion for the NMP scheme. And I think if
not necessarily in his current form. I think I always qualify
and
that.
what would you want to change about it?
I think it should be strengthened with more transparency. This latest survey is very clear that Singaporeans, because this is a representative survey. Actually, I think it was over 70%. So it's quite a majority of Singaporeans who still want to see alternative voices to the current system that we have in Parliament. That needs to change. So the selection process, we need to know more about. Even I myself also don't know why I was selected. So we probably need to also look into, the nominations process, the selection process. This survey also showed a majority of Singaporeans want to have some involvement in the NMP scheme. Of course, this is a very curious case of
in selecting
how many elections do we need, right? Yeah. So what struck me most was what we call the independence premium in the survey. Singaporeans have no issue NMPs joining a political party after their term.
Oh.
But their preference, and it's a huge preference, about 10 to 14 percentage points, is for them to run as independent candidates.
I see.
So there's still this preference towards independence. I must emphasize that when we say independent, we are talking about non-partisan.
Yeah, because over on Facebook, if you look at a lot of the social media comments, when it comes to is whether the NMP scheme is still relevant, a lot of the critics or criticism tends to be, if they're gonna resign and join a political party immediately, then is it really relevant or is it just like a pipeline?
Can you even say that they're independent?
Yeah.
Of the two, one of them ended up joining the PAP and then running and winning his seat, right? As part of the GRC team.
Yeah, and he's actually made immediately a political office holder.
That's another point. And just to run it back to what you said about the data of people of the electorate saying, you know what, this is something I'm cool with.
Yeah.
I don't know how accurate that is because first of all, he's not that he ran in a SMC and then so he was part of a GRC team with a very competent set of people around him.
Very seasoned minister as well.
So if you had put some other candidate in his spot, who's to say, wouldn't have done similarly well. So that's one.
Yeah.
But also, I don't want to run it back to what John was saying earlier, a little bit about the fact that it's almost as if like it's some fringe causes that, that the NMP scheme is meant to help represent. Maybe this is just a compliment to the system, but the fact that she brought up the two things that her causes were like of the 3 M's.
Yeah.
Today they are front and center in the political discussion. Maybe she just has very good foresight and she just picked really well.
Some might argue ahead of its time.
Okay, very much.
Some might argue, can you imagine what she's able to accomplish had she been partisan?
This one, stirrer.
Right? If you are standing at the sidelines and be able to do so much, can you imagine if you were in the room?
But John, that's a good point, and thank you for that. Bringing that up. But I also say that
where are you going to bring that up? Keep it here.
I don't think we are saying that we categorically don't want NMPs to, down the road, continue to want to be politically engaged.
Sure.
So a few of us, former NMPs, actually also put together a letter to the Prime Minister, right, requesting for a review of the scheme. And what we suggested, which also, it seems like many Singaporeans also agreed about the cooling off period. So that idea came out in all the interviews and news reporting during the vaccination, right? That cooling off period, so that then clearly when they were in service for this scheme, they were still non-partisan and independent.
Right.
Because if you resign on the 14th of February saying that you no longer can be non-partisan, are you saying that you just realized it yesterday and then you immediately quit? But then you cannot immediately quit and join a political party. We know that both political parties or most political parties, they need to vet you, they need to talk to you, they need to have tea sessions with you. So then if you join a political party almost immediately after you have resigned, did those tea sessions happen when you were non-partisan? I would dare argue that it's really not such a, it's quite a low-hanging fruit of a change to make.
For it to be non-partisan, it then shouldn't be selected by fellow MPs. It should then be like a presidential special council who then decides 9 people.
Agree. That was what I was thinking about.
Do you know the makeup of the
If you think about if we simplify the role to an extreme example of simplicity, which is that someone gets to bring up issues on the fringe that must be vote independent, must be able to survive voting scrutiny. I would wager that this is a role that can be replaced by AI.
Okay, hard disagree.
No. Actually, it's so interesting. I literally just had a discussion with someone saying, when will we see parliaments bringing AI parliamentarians?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Just very recently, I just had this.
I super agree. Yeah, to the point whereby because the conversations are being analysed, the news are being analysed, forums are being analysed, we pick out what's happening, what's the trend, and all these things and all the big data companies that the Pentagon is super funding. These are the ones that's going to bring this thing front and center. And it's like, okay, can Parliament address this issue?
But the problem is that AIs are mostly run by private organizations. So it's not to say that these AI
it's not without agenda.
Meant to say it's a listening tool.
Let's just say this AI, magically is not created by a private company. So there's no agenda that's already baked into it. Not like what Grok is trying to push or whatever, stuff like that. It's its own thing. It's purely taking in data and giving you a result and be like, you make this a law, this is the best possible thing. The emotion has been taken out of it. So now it's purely like all data based, and the kind of decisions you make will hurt people.
I think until we really become completely AI driven, the persuasion and the debate that you do in Parliament to move policies can be done without emotion. There has to be some sort of a, I'm not saying that it should be all emotionally based, but I'm always going to say that it needs to come back to going beyond the numbers, right? To know that this is urgent and very important because actually human lives are affected. Right? Otherwise, the whole migrant issue could actually, actually at this juncture, I just want to say, these two topics that I raised were also the only topics every time I spoke up on it that I get not just pushback, but sometimes more than pushback, hate comments.
Wow.
That's why I don't blame even the opposition party members who don't want to bring up, because they obviously got the pulse of, you know, what electors want
might
to
lose votes over it.
Oh no, for sure. That's why I say politically it's suicidal, right? And they got the pulse. I don't. I'm just bringing it up because this community is not represented. So raising this is important for me, right? And to give them, and actually, I mean, I think it's a very interesting hypothesis and painting the possibility.
That everybody in parliament that's elected has to at least have a representative to give a statement or position on surfaced matter. So now, right, so the extreme example would be, for example, migrant worker safety. Now, PAP needs to come out and say what they think about it. Do they think it's a problem, not a problem? And then that's your position. And then Workers' Party will come out and say how much of it is a problem, how much of it is not a problem. And then that's your position. And then I think we are forced to confront all our problems, and then we know where everybody stands on every problem.
Right.
Because right now, we don't.
Yeah.
We don't know which party stands on where.
Because a member can bring up something, and if no one has any questions or anything, it just gets said.
In the
ether.
thank you, Anthea.
Yeah.
Anthea.
That's
I mean, isn't that what your manifesto is supposed to be? It's no tying back, right? So this is me tying back. So parties come out with the election manifestos, right? In that term of the 5 years or 4.5, whatever, who is then actually hold them to account to what they say they would do in the manifesto?
there's no report card to go, this is everything that you ticked
We
off.
don't.
Which is what the parties tried to do in the campaign for this time round. They tried to do a report card for the
On
last
their
4
own
years.
night. Yeah.
But nobody remember the manifesto at the beginning.
Exactly.
That's what the fourth estate of the media is supposed to be.
In Malaysia and in Canada, it started in Canada, then someone in Malaysia tried to do that. It's called Open Promises, right? It's a platform that basically lists down every politician, every minister, you say you want to do this, I'm going to track you. And the citizens track, right? So they have a platform that's built in such a way that every time you hear some MP say something, then you just update it and all that, right? And this started in Canada.
It should be ELD's role.
Yeah, so we don't quite do that. So then it feels like every time we have an election, it's like a new election manifesto that we then got interested again, and you know what they stand for and all that.
Cycle. Is that what NMPs could be then? Like if we are looking at reform, then technically if they are meant to be non-partisan, shouldn't there be at least a little block within the 9 or maybe expand it to be the referees or to be the checkers in parliament?
In the EBRC, for example.
Right. Yeah.
No, I think the scope needs to be expanded.
Yes.
The way I see it, the scope needs to be expanded.
That's an interesting idea.
Because NCMP has reached their role where even if at that point you cannot make a difference on fringe issues, then maybe you are really not cut out for it already. Okay, unpopular statement, okay, or maybe a potentially annoying statement to you, right, would be that if you didn't bring it up when you brought it up, I believe it will still be an issue now. You know, it's front and center. The issues that you brought up is front and center in Parliament today. How much of it is because she brought it up?
No, of course.
And all credits to you, okay?
No, of course. And like I said, it's a timing issue, right? I would then say that you're absolutely spot on, and we will never know, right? Because no one predicted COVID. I certainly didn't.
In the same way, it could be totally all her. So
But COVID really did do in 1 year what many of us in the mental health community couldn't do for years, to bring attention to it, right? And for me, I was just so fortunate to then have this platform to be able to sort of really raise issues, that actually we've all been sort of championing and advocating for, right, for many years. So you're right, we'll never really ever know.
But my point being that we need to expand the scope, and I think there is a very beautiful part where if you are completely independent, or at least supposed to be, I mean, we all have our biases to some extent. Then there are things like the
EBRC
that we can deal with.
And MPs can be part of.
Or like, for example, when we know clearly the incumbent and opposition is saying the same thing, but they're just trying to get the last word in. But they're actually on the same page, but they're trying to score political points. Then that's where an MP come out and say, what are we doing?
Yeah, we went for a Diary of CEO Stephen Bartlett's chat, and the last thing he said was actually how he is purely non-partisan, and it's because he's so frustrated that actually both parties, regardless of who, they are so stuck in the frame that they end up advocating for party rather than finding the solution.
Same. I would agree. It would be my stand as well. I would also ask, will you change the system or will the system change you, right? I mean, we don't know that. We don't know yet. And even as NMPs, right, it's not as if you don't get conversations that also start to sway you. You know, remember that we actually spent time during parliamentary breaks in the tea room. You know, fun fact, when I first joined, so obviously they all very nicely welcome us. So we were, you know, so the room is like that. Nice room. So then you see the PAP folks all in this corner, which is the sort of the lower left-hand corner. And then the WP was the top right-hand corner. Yeah. But you see some obviously go and say hi and all that, which, you know, good respect, because we should be civil. Doesn't matter. Right? It shouldn't be. Yeah. But after a while, I was like, no, you know, I'm not comfortable in this part because there was quite a bit of conversations going on with the MPs, ministers wanting to sort of lobby for things and, you know, and all that. Then I decided, okay, let's start. I mean, really, we should be in the middle, right? So we did lah. So we started. Apparently now the NMPs do have that
you guys brought up a table to the new flag lah.
And then what happens that you see both sides can come and hang out. Which also speaks of who I wouldn't say who came to hang out with us and all that, but you see from both sides.
Tell us who refused to come over to the middle section.
No.
Who refused to enter the Switzerland of the tea room.
What happens in the tea room stays in the tea room.
Someone on Reddit who was just a complete like independent user, I think, actually did an entire graph chart to see like all the representation of the MP. So from age to gender to race and religion, and almost every other stat except for race, right, was misrepresented compared to the population. Like there was an overrepresentation of Christians, for example, way too much men.
Yes, for sure. That
but
one.
race was perfectly represented based on, and that was because
that's
of
so
the
interesting.
system.
I missed that. I did not.
So as flawed as it is, there is obviously some perk as to represent all the races in Singapore appropriately.
But this just feels like we've picked one stat and we said, I can sack everything else. I can sacrifice everything else.
It's also the priority. Is that the
one.
most important thing? And I'll also argue, like truly, I mean, even in terms of our racial makeup, right?
Yeah.
I mean, now you have the double barrel already, right? In terms of race.
Sure.
I mean, what my friends call the third culture kids, right? Well, I see someone saying, I'm being represented here in this conversation. My biggest thing also, I think is really important. We may be very intentional with racial diversity, but we may not be as intentional with religious diversity.
But hard also. Like if they were to introduce a new system.
Because only
people
one
will
of
convert
these...
because everything is by blood, you see.
Yeah, I know.
If you do religion, right, then a bunch of people will be like, okay, can you all just behave like, can you all pretend that you are Buddhist for 5 years? And then what are we doing to society,
But
you know?
to be honest, the race doesn't necessarily mean that you will speak up for your community, right? For me, I personally feel very strongly about that. If we're the majority, then the majority always set the social norms.
Yeah.
And therefore, we need to be aware that of the privilege and speak up.
I think the problem lies
to the critical race theory, no?
I have lived overseas, right? I've lived in Indonesia. I've lived in Sydney. When I was in Sydney, I can categorically tell you there was no Chinese privilege. So for me, I bring it down. I bring it down to majority, minority.
Yeah.
Brilliant, yeah.
And that, I think, will make it less emotional when you look at it this way than to go out and use the narrative of white privilege, Chinese privilege, don't know what. Just see majority privilege because that's quite natural, right? It's a law of nature that, of course, the majority is going to set the social norms.
I think the problem then lies if there was a lack of representation and then a lack of talking about these issues, then I think that would be a bigger issue. I just want to pick your brain on a couple of things. So, of course, on the public consultation, there were a couple of very interesting results. And I also realized that you actually wrote about it, which was a very sobering result. Even though 70% or over 70% said that the NMP scheme provided needed alternative voices, 32% rated the scheme as relevant.
Yeah.
So I could interpret it as 40% felt that alternative voices are not relevant. Essentially in
it is.
Parliament.
I mean, there's about 50% that stays in the middle. Again, half cup full. I see that as if you want alternative voices in Parliament, of course, it could be and should be in the form of voting in more opposition, right? Then do it if you want to, right? And show it at the ballot boxes. But then the fact that only 1 in 3 felt very relevant or highly relevant, then it shows that, we need to do something about this current scheme.
Right. Reform, change.
That's why I'm saying that as much as I stand for this, I'm not saying just keep it as it is. Right. No, I'm also saying that please don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah. And John and I are saying broaden the scope.
You'll come up with more things that we have thought of. Like, wow, you really went all out in the EBRC lah. Don't know what.
But the moment the filming end, we move on with life.
Yeah. The other thing was that I think 53% said that they wanted a public vote on NMPs.
Yes.
It's a little bit strange because I think a lot of the former NMPs were saying that the beauty of the role was that it was non-partisan and that you don't have to fight for votes.
Yes.
Essentially. So then if it's elected, then I don't know whether it works.
That's why I was sharing also in the book, right? Some mandate is better than no mandate.
Okay.
And my suggestion was going a bit wild on the out there. We already have a Singaporean of the Year.
Okay.
Right? Which is not a popularity contest. We know that. It's about the ideals of what, a true Singaporean that we aspire towards is, right? So that's kind of a vote, kind of a mandate lah. I wouldn't say a vote lah, but it's some sort of a mandate, right? So maybe there could be some sort of citizen nominations of NMP candidates, or when you come down to the short list, some level of choice made. Can I just say we really have to reimagine that again? Right?
Sure.
Because I really think that we are confusing the sort of the local aspect of it and lawmaking, right? And MPs are meant to be lawmakers check, on the government, right? They're not meant to be municipal managers. But I do think though that if you want the NMPs to add value to the discourse in Parliament, in other words, you want them to be good lawmakers and, checking the government and all that, right? In lawmaking, then legislative and secretarial support should be on par. Because you expect us to still do research and then write speeches. Salary, okay lah, fair enough lah, but I think the legislative and secretarial support.
To be able to do the job but not be monetarily incentivized to do the job. Was there a moment where you plan to open this book? Can we manufacture that moment for you?
Yeah. Like you wanted a reference?
No.
I have several dog years I can see. No, I'm just kidding.
No, don't have. But certainly very like...
yes.
But I think what you'll find interesting in this book, if anything, is that the reason why we did this book is because really there hasn't been a book on NMP at all. I mean, some academic papers, maybe one or two commentaries, but not a book for the general reader. And whether or not NMP scheme continues and it gets abolished one day or it gets reformed, it is part of our political history and culture.
Right.
And I think it's important. Okay, I go to the relics, never mind lah. But I think it's important to capture the lived experiences. There were two first NMPs. One of them has already passed on, right? And we do have the very first one, the other one, Professor Maurice Chu, who kicked off with the first chapter in the book. So I think capturing that is important.
It's so interesting because this was like 2.5 years of your life. 3 years essentially of your life.
Oh no, you mean I thought
about being an NMP.
Yeah.
And for you to write the book, to gather all these voices, to moderate the speaking around it, it must have meant so much to you that you're advocating for it.
It did. It felt like if there's anything that I wanted to do for my country, this was it, right?
That you must keep this going.
I want to keep it going only because there's something very deeply intuitive telling me that, we've got a real gem of a innovation, right? And I think I'm putting on my CEO hat, my visionary hat that I had to do when I was in the corporate sector, where you kind of have to read ahead, right? I mean, a good leader sees a future just like an artist that has not happened. And I feel like this keeps coming back to me that if we just keep saying, it's not democratic, they're all partisan, they're all pro-establishment, without doing something about it. Well, first of all, it's not very entrepreneurial. If you have a problem, then fix it lah, right? Why just go and scrap it? And then also seeing what's going around, right, in the geopolitics and also the different political systems that are falling apart, in front of us. Yeah, I just feel like, and I'm not the only champion of this, I just feel like having been given this opportunity, given the ability and maybe the resources and the privilege I have, just keep it in our consciousness. And then let us at least have a national conversation around it about what's the shape of our parliament going forward. Right? And not be just contented with, it's going to just be more opposition. Then the ruling party just be more willing to, get your MPs to speak up. I don't think it's that simple. Yeah, and I don't think we should make it that simple. So better to ask more questions than to think that we have arrived at the right answers.
Thank you so much, Anthea, for joining us. And thank you so much for watching this episode of Daily Ketchup. We'll see you in the next one. Like, share, subscribe. Bye-bye.
Maybe there could be some sort of citizen nominations of NMP candidates or choice made, of the candidates.
Like non-compulsory online voting of sorts.
Something like that, right?
Requires some form of campaigning.
Wait.
Or you don't allow
Sing pass
campaigning.
so that we know that it's a citizen.
Wait, in this conversation, this person is running against another nominee? Or is it I'm voting yes or no on this person?
That's a good question,
Oh.
right? Because if
You
it's
endorse one, like everybody endorse one.
yeah, exactly.
Do you people? That's interesting. Imagine getting a no from there though. Wow, that sucks, yeah.
No, but it could also...
that will suck, man.
Hey, but
not-
also grow up lah. You can't be like.
Honestly, yeah.
I just feel like we are also thin-skinned. Cannot think people don't like you.
You put 1% up, then 60% say no, I don't want him. It's okay, nominated, no.
Imagine how Ang Chi Ming feels.
Hey!